over the past years, we've seen an increasing collaboration between IOE and UNDESA. We've worked on various events, we've done initiatives with the private sector, and really furthering the UN's work on the SDGs. Now, looking ahead in the next 5 years remaining to achieve the SDGs, how do you see the role of the private sector evolving within the UN system? And in your view, how can we engage better, be more aligned, strengthened, reimagine to help accelerate the agenda at such a critical juncture?
Well, thanks for asking that question. We've just had our SDG report, the stock take of where we are at as a global community in reaching our joint action plan that we agreed in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals. And we are not on track to reach most of them. We are more or less on track for about a third, but for 18% of them, we are regressing. So there's a lot of work to do if we're going to achieve those joint goals in the 5 years that we have left. And the global business community is such a vital partner in getting there. So we're very happy to be working together. The business community is a major group, to use the UN language, around how we engage with different groups. But much more than that, the business community is vital in helping to shape the agenda and the discussions, helping while we are having our consultations here in New York, but not least in implementing the commitments and the agreements that we get to. Those agreements, they may look nice on paper, but they don't mean much unless they translate into change in people's lives on the ground, in the communities where, I think we have joint interest in working. So the partnership with the business community is vital in getting there. And thanks, Shea, for mentioning the shared interests that the global business community and the global community, when we get together at the United Nations, have. We have shared interest in promoting the rule of law, in promoting very predictable environments for citizens and for people, but which is also so important for business to be able to operate, to work on how we can formalize employment. One of the biggest challenges that come out in our reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals is how many people who are in informal employment. If we can work together to formalize and make sure that people can get a living wage. There's so much that we need to work on together. And I know that the business community is very committed to and has also great ideas and approaches that I know that we can capitalize on.
Well, thank you. So thank you, Bjorg. You've actually hit on the topic. Again, I was very pleased at the HLPF when you came out with that report. I mean, there's some alarming figures in there. While one good thing is there has been progress when I look at electricity and some of the health issues. But 9% of the global population is projected to remain in poverty. 1 in 11 people experiencing hunger in 2023. And 270 million children and youth out of school, and persistent gender gap, particularly in cared work. So I noticed that you had some priorities, and exactly what you're saying. You were saying urgent action needs to be in transforming food systems, expanding energy access, to advancing digital inclusion, education, decent jobs, social protection, and climate and diversity. This is IOE's mandate. This is our bread and butter. So, you in light of all of this, I get it that education and health are critical and they need addressing. But at the same time, exactly what you said, the informal economy is huge. In Africa, we're talking about 90%. And for employers, we're saying, and we've just had a big conference in Africa on this, we know what the solutions are. The problem is in the implementation. And we know that if we get this right in formalizing employment, people get social protection. They're in what we call the decent work agenda. But also, this is also through taxes a great way for resource mobilization at the local level. But do you see anything as we're moving on to the World Social Summit that you think business should be doing in those agendas?
Thanks for asking that question. You know, there is so much that business is doing and so much that we can partner in advancing social development, advancing better social inclusion, advancing equality, and not least in advancing decent work. It's such an important part of the whole social development agenda and such an important part of the discussions that we are having leading up to the second World Social Summit that will happen in Qatar in November. So a number of things that we can do. And public-private partnerships have proven to be a great vehicle to achieve many of our shared goals around, for example, more formalization of employment and ensuring that people have a living wage. There's a lot happening around digitalization. Now, making sure that people have ID and a digital ID can help, again, formalize employment. It can also help governments provide social protection and important services. And that's an area also where it's good to partner with the private sector. And we've seen how businesses can be involved in advancing digitalization and making sure that people have ID. Of course, that digitalization can also help companies to register. We know that in many of the countries of the Global South, we hear that it's difficult for private companies to become formalized and register. So we can work together on not just digitalization around individual people's IDs, but also around processes for registering companies, which in turn enables tax collection, so important for redistribution, but also to make sure that governments have income, which again in turn can be used for social protection, but also for creating those stable environments that businesses thrive in. So there's a lot of areas that we can work together on that include those priority areas in the SDG report, such as improving food security, improving digitalization, improving education, and so on.
So I really like your idea, this whole area of technology, data, innovation, because that's where the private sector really is at an advantage. And we have excellent examples of many of our companies that are really training young people. And we know such a need of those that are not in education, not in training, and not in employment. A lot of these companies are setting up very creative apprenticeship programs for older workers and younger workers to really make this transition into this world of AI. So business is there on the technology side. However, currently within ECOSOC, business is represented, as you said, in the major groups, but there are 22 major groups from civil society, which are all extremely important, and they have their agendas. But almost in every meeting we go to, the private sector is mentioned. But we're not always present, and we're not always represented. So how do you see a better engagement with the private sector at some of these UN events?
So the business engagement in our processes at the UN, not least now in the preparation for the second World Summit for Social Development coming up in Qatar, is extremely important. We've really appreciated you getting together as a business community in the business advisory group. It helps for us to get that unified voice from business, to see you and the other stakeholders from the business sector getting together and giving us very clear, concise feedback. We've appreciated your feedback into the draft of the outcome document that is being negotiated right now between member states. Having that a formalized position that you have as a major group also enables that input. But of course, there are important discussions that we need to have now in preparations, and we appreciate you being here and having those discussions. We also appreciate the work that you do at the country level. But of course, we are now in New York. We think about our global processes and our important negotiations that are happening here. But to translate all of that into changes in people's lives on the ground, we need your engagement at the country level. And I think I'd really like to commend the work that you've done with the with the RCs, the resident coordinators, which means the UN system at the country level, to help guide them in their engagement there. So we have that good engagement from the country level all the way up to the global level negotiations that are happening here at the UN. So you asked for specifics. The Global Business Advisory Group, very important discussions that we are having. When you bring business voices to speak at the UN, they bring very important perspectives. I find when I engage with the business community, they also bring a bit of urgency. And they push us as the UN to be more specific, to move faster, and to move to implementation. And I think, all of those inputs that we get from the business sector are we really appreciate that partnership.
Now, the World Social Summit, we're very excited. It's going to be happening in November in Qatar. And in the whole spirit of inclusive multilateralism, how can we ensure that the summit is successful and that we really have the voice of business, both large and small companies included? And, what are the opportunities for business when we come together, but also a little bit about your vision about the outcomes. I'm sure you have some clear deliverables that you want, but if we know those, we can try to help. So how can we help you achieve your goals?
Thank you. As we prepare for the Second World Summit for Social Development, we do see that there's a need to really move the needle on social development. We appreciate the partnership of business in the preparations for the Social Summit. And we've seen that in the inputs that you have provided to the political negotiations that happened in New York that will result in a negotiated political declaration. And from your inputs, we see that we have shared goals. We have shared goals around predictability, around rule of law, and taking a whole of government approach and whole of society approach to these issues that we are talking about. Now, very specifically, at the Social Summit itself in Qatar, there will be opportunities to engage. There are discussions to have a business forum. We appreciate that your involvement in thinking through which voices do we bring in, how do we bring the business voices to the table. There will be a number of side events as well, and we know how important those are in really getting the right issues on the agenda, but not least to talk about how we implement. So we will have the political declaration there in Qatar. It will be adopted. I hope it will help us, move forward on important issues around social development, around decent work, around social inclusion. And we look forward to partnering with the business community in those discussions around how do we take this forward? How do we make sure that in the countries, in particular of the Global South, can we promote agendas around decent work, around formalization of employment, around digitalization and making sure people have a digital ID, all these questions that we've talked about. So the business community has an important role to play, providing inputs into the political declaration, but not least in the discussions of how we take it forward, how we translate that vision into reality on the ground.
So Bjorg, at the ILO, the IOE represents the voice of employers, the 150 throughout the world. And then, of course, there's the workers, and then there's also the government. It's an excellent tripartite collaboration. At the local level, social dialogue is absolutely critical for us. But at the UN, we don't always see this. So how do we bring this together around the policy agenda that you're talking around decent work, informality, living wage, etc.?
That's a great question. And as we prepare for the Second World Summit for Social Development, where a lot of questions around the world of work are key on the agenda, not least you mentioned decent work, living wage, formalization of employment, and so on. I think what we have at the global level is good commitments, and we'll get sound commitments from member states. But we also need that partnership to translate all those commitments into reality in people's lives on the ground. And the tripartite social dialogue is so important in ensuring that we get tailor-made solutions in the different country contexts, because countries are different, they may have different needs, and the dialogues in the countries will help then translate those commitments into realities, into real policies that business and governments and then other stakeholders in countries can implement to help advance, the important agenda that we are talking about.
So at the end of the day, it's the key buzzwords: social dialogue, collaboration, partnership, really working together to push our 2030 agenda forward. So thank you so much. I think we're all on the same page. We just need to really make sure that we move. And as you said, private sector can be impatient. So we're really keen to work with you to make this move fast.
Great. Thank you.